The sun had barely risen over the vast stretches of the ranch, painting the endless fields in a golden hue that hinted at both opportunity and isolation. From his high veranda, the rancher surveyed his domain with a practiced eye. Every fence, every corral, every paddock had been crafted under his meticulous supervision, and he took pride in the perfection of it all. Yet beneath the disciplined exterior, a gnawing emptiness lingered, a solitude that no amount of wealth could erase. He was a man of considerable means, known across the county for his thriving ranch, stocked with healthy livestock and fertile land. But despite his prosperity, the rancher was wary of those who sought to enter his life. Experience had taught him that wealth often attracts false smiles and hidden agendas. Friends were few, and acquaintances were mostly cautious or opportunistic. Love had long eluded him, and he had grown accustomed to the rhythm of his own company, the steady clatter of hooves, the lowing of cattle, the creak of the wind through the wooden fences. People in town spoke of him with a mix of awe and fear. He was a man who demanded respect, who measured worth by diligence and honesty. Yet they whispered of his loneliness too, noting the absence of a companion to share his triumphs and his nights. To the rancher, these whispers were inconsequential. The only truth that mattered was what he saw with his own eyes and the judgment he rendered from experience. He trusted little, even those who seemed genuinely kind, for he had learned to distinguish appearances from reality. Despite his stern exterior, the rancher was not cruel. He treated his workers fairly, rewarded hard work, and expected loyalty in return. He believed that life was a careful balance between giving and taking, and he had mastered the art of self-sufficiency. But in the quiet hours when the wind rustled the trees and the horizon stretched endlessly before him, he felt the ache of emptiness more keenly. There were no letters waiting in his mailbox, no warm greetings at his doorstep. Only the vast echoing halls of his house and the sprawling lands he had built with his own hands. His days were measured by routine. Morning chores, inspecting the livestock, maintaining fences, overseeing deliveries of feed and supplies. These occupied his waking hours. Yet routine could not fill the void left by human connection. He had long ago decided that companionship was a luxury he could not afford. Not because of a lack of desire, but because of the cost of trust in a world where so many were driven by self-interest. Still, beneath the armor of caution and discipline, a part of him yearned for something more, a warmth that wealth alone could not provide, a presence that could soften his solitary nights. It was a faint, almost imperceptible longing, one he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. He buried it under work, under pride, under the relentless demands of the ranch. Yet it persisted, quietly shaping his thoughts whenever the night was still and the ranch slept under the watchful stars. And so, the rancher remained a figure of strength, wealth, and solitude, a man who commanded respect, but who, deep down, wondered whether someone existed who could see past his stern exterior and into the guarded heart beneath. Little did he know, that moment of fate was approaching in the form of a widow, whose resilience and humility would soon challenge everything he thought he knew about trust, love, and the human heart. The widow arrived in the small, dusty town at the edge of the ranch as the morning sun gilded the horizon, her steps weary but determined. Her life had been a series of struggles, the most recent being the loss of her husband, who had succumbed to illness months earlier, leaving her with both grief and mounting debts. She was not a woman accustomed to surrender, though. She carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the weight of hardship pressing on her shoulders. Her eyes, though shadowed with sorrow, held a spark of resilience that refused to be extinguished. She had traveled for days, on foot, and by whatever means she could manage in search of work and stability. Every step had been a test of her endurance, and every challenge she faced along the way had only strengthened her resolve. Her clothing was simple, patched in places but clean, signaling a pride in her appearance even amidst scarcity. She was no stranger to labor, to the sweat and effort required to survive, and she knew that honesty and diligence were her most valuable assets. The widow's first impressions of the town were tinged with both hope and caution. Life here seemed stark but manageable, with small shops and a handful of families making do in a harsh, sun-scorched environment. She paused briefly at the edge of the ranch, gazing at the vast, well-tended land, imagining the work it must take to maintain such a place. To her, it was both intimidating and inspiring, a symbol of stability she had never known, but desperately sought. Her initial days were spent finding odd jobs, helping at the market or doing domestic chores for the few families willing to employ her. Each task she undertook, she performed with meticulous care, aware that her reputation here would determine whether she could truly start over. The townspeople noticed her quiet competence and her kind disposition, traits that earned her cautious admiration. Whispers of respect followed her, though she paid them little mind, focused solely on her goal, survival and dignity. It was during one of these early mornings that she first saw the rancher. From a distance, she observed the man who seemed to command both the land and the attention of the workers. He was imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes sharp and calculating, and a presence that spoke of authority and wealth. Yet beneath the stern exterior, she sensed a loneliness in him, an invisible burden that mirrored her own. Though she did not know it yet, their lives were on a collision course, drawn together by circumstances neither could foresee. The widow's practical nature guided her approach. She realized that if she were to earn a place in this town, perhaps even on the ranch, she would need to prove herself useful, trustworthy, and competent. She approached small opportunities with humility, never overstepping or showing entitlement. Her quiet strength and willingness to work hard became evident to those who observed her, slowly building a foundation of respect in the community. Yet, even as she moved through her daily routines, a sense of uncertainty lingered. The widow had learned from life's harsh lessons that not everyone's intentions were pure, and she guarded her heart carefully. Still, she allowed herself a glimmer of hope that perhaps here, in this rugged town and among the wide-open fields, she could find not just work, but a chance at a new beginning. By the end of her first week, it was clear to both the townspeople and herself that she was someone who could endure hardship, someone who would not break under pressure. Little did she know, the next step of her journey would bring her face to face with the very man whose guarded heart had never before let another in. A rich rancher who would soon test her in ways neither of them could anticipate. The day the widow first set foot on the ranch grounds, she felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and quiet determination. She had heard tales of the rancher from townsfolk, his wealth, his stern reputation, and his unyielding nature. To her, the sprawling estate was both daunting and mesmerizing. Miles of well-kept fields, neatly lined fences, and livestock grazing peacefully under the morning sun. Every detail spoke of discipline, precision, and years of hard labor. She could see immediately that this was not just a home, but a legacy, a life built on sweat, perseverance, and relentless attention to detail. She approached the ranch gates cautiously, unsure whether her presence would be welcome. Her heart quickened as she saw him standing near the veranda, surveying the property with that characteristic air of authority. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a posture that exuded confidence. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the horizon as if measuring not just the land, but the intentions of anyone who dared cross it. For a moment, the widow felt the weight of his scrutiny as if he could see right through her patched clothes, tired feet, and careful demeanor, straight into her very character. The rancher noticed her immediately, her presence interrupting the usual quiet of the morning. He had rarely seen anyone approach his property without hesitation or expectation, and something about her, her calm composure, the quiet strength in her eyes, caught his attention. There was no boldness, no presumptuousness, just a humble, steady confidence that seemed rare in the people who passed through the town. He studied her silently for a moment, assessing whether she was someone with potential or merely another transient seeking work or favor. Their first words were cautious and measured. The widow greeted him politely, offering a small nod and a soft, "Good morning," her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The rancher's reply was equally restrained, a curt acknowledgement that held both authority and curiosity. Neither spoke more than necessary at first, each careful not to reveal too much of themselves. Yet in that brief exchange, there was a subtle recognition. Two people, both carrying burdens and a measure of loneliness, sizing each other up without pretense or artifice. The widow explained her situation briefly, noting her search for work and willingness to contribute wherever she could. The rancher listened, his expression unreadable, yet he could not ignore the sincerity in her tone. She did not beg or plead, nor did she exaggerate her abilities. She simply stated the truth of her circumstances, letting her actions speak louder than words. This honesty intrigued him. It was rare to encounter someone so straightforward in a world where many masked their intentions. After a tense moment of silence, he offered her a small task, a simple chore to gauge her work ethic and temperament. She accepted without hesitation, approaching the work with diligence, care, and quiet competence. Her hands, though gentle, moved with confidence, reflecting a lifetime of labor and responsibility. The rancher observed from a distance, making mental notes of her efficiency, attention to detail, and the respect she showed for the land and its inhabitants. By the end of the day, the widow had made an impression not through charm or flattery, but through her integrity and resilience. The rancher, who had grown accustomed to superficial displays and opportunistic behavior, found himself oddly unsettled yet fascinated by her. She had met his guarded demeanor with honesty and calm strength, qualities he had rarely encountered. That first encounter planted the seed of intrigue, a quiet acknowledgement that this woman was different, that her presence might challenge the routine and the isolation he had carefully cultivated. Neither knew it yet. But this brief meeting marked the beginning of a journey, one that would test boundaries, reveal hidden truths, and eventually open the door to connection, trust, and perhaps even love. After the initial encounter, the widow found herself walking along the ranch's vast expanse each morning, carrying out the small tasks the rancher had quietly assigned her. At first, the chores were simple: feeding the animals, mending broken fences, cleaning out the stables, and assisting the ranch hands with their routines. Though the work was physically demanding, she approached each task with determination, her hands working steadily, her movements precise. She understood that the rancher valued competence and reliability above all else, and she resolved to prove herself worthy of his trust. The rancher observed her from a distance at first, maintaining a careful distance while noting her every action. He had seen many people come and go, drawn to the ranch by curiosity, desperation, or greed. Yet there was something different about this widow, something in the way she approached her work with humility, yet without self-deprecation. She carried herself as someone accustomed to responsibility, unafraid of labor, and conscious of the value of diligence. This quiet strength intrigued him, challenging his assumptions about people who sought proximity to his wealth. Days passed, and the widow began to integrate herself into the rhythm of the ranch. She learned the intricate routines of feeding, watering, and grooming the animals. She mended fences, patched roofs, and even helped with the bookkeeping in small ways, always careful not to overstep. Her interactions with the ranch hands were respectful, yet she did not shy away from taking initiative when she saw something amiss. Slowly, they began to respect her, appreciating her efficiency, honesty, and gentle demeanor. She was not a woman of idle words or false charm. Her value was evident in the results of her labor. One morning, a problem arose with one of the horses, an animal prone to skittishness and stubbornness. The ranch hands had struggled to calm it, but the widow approached with patience, speaking softly to the creature, guiding it with a gentle hand and steady voice. Within minutes, she had the horse cooperating, its panic replaced by calm obedience. The rancher, watching from the veranda, could scarcely believe what he saw. Her instinct, her compassion, and her knowledge of animals were extraordinary. He had expected effort, perhaps competence, but not this natural ability, this combination of skill and empathy. Her consistent performance did not go unnoticed. The rancher began to allow her slightly more responsibility, testing her judgment in small ways. He asked her opinion on minor matters, gauged how she handled unexpected challenges, and watched her interact with the ranch hands and animals. Each day she proved her reliability, yet she never sought praise or recognition. Her satisfaction came from doing the work well and contributing meaningfully to the ranch. By the end of the first month, it was clear that she had earned a permanent place on the ranch. The rancher, though still guarded, began to acknowledge her presence as an asset rather than a potential threat. He found himself observing her more often, noticing subtle qualities he had not expected: her kindness, patience, intelligence, and quiet resilience. She did not try to impress him, nor did she flaunt her growing competence. Instead, she simply continued to work diligently, letting her character speak for itself. The relationship between them remained cautious yet curious. The widow understood the necessity of respect and boundaries, and the rancher was slowly learning that trust, though rare, could be nurtured when earned. The foundation of their connection was being built not on words, promises, or declarations, but on the honest, steady rhythm of work, shared responsibility, and mutual recognition of each other's strengths. Little did they know, the widow's unwavering integrity would soon be tested in a way that would challenge both her courage and the rancher's long-held distrust. A decision awaited him, one that would reveal not only her character, but also the possibility of a bond deeper than either had imagined. As days turned into weeks, the rancher grew increasingly aware of the widow's presence on his land. Her diligence, honesty, and quiet strength had not gone unnoticed, yet a part of him remained skeptical. In all his years, he had learned that appearances could be deceiving. People often masked their true intentions, drawn to his wealth, comfort, or influence rather than the person beneath. Despite her evident integrity, he could not fully trust that her kindness was genuine. After much contemplation, he devised a subtle, unconventional test to observe her without her awareness. It was a strategy born from years of caution, a way to discern true character in a world that often rewarded deceit. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the ranch was bathed in twilight, he decided to act. Pretending to retire early for the night, he set the scene carefully, the house quiet, candles dimmed, and a blanket drawn loosely over him as he lay motionless in bed. To anyone observing, he appeared asleep, entirely unaware of his surroundings. From a discreet vantage point, he watched the widow go about her evening routine. She had no reason to know she was under observation. She approached the household tasks as she always did, tending to the animals, preparing supplies for the next day, and ensuring that everything in the house was orderly. Her movements were unhurried but purposeful, carried out with care and attention to detail. Each action revealed not only competence but also a natural empathy, a concern for the well-being of those around her. The rancher's eyes were drawn particularly to her interactions with the animals and the household staff. She spoke to them softly, correcting gently when necessary, yet always with respect. She ensured that every creature under her care was attended to, no matter how small or inconvenient the task. There was no thought of personal gain, no hint of pretense, only an instinctive understanding of responsibility and compassion. For the rancher, accustomed to calculating every person's motive, this display was both unfamiliar and astonishing. Minutes stretched into hours as he continued his quiet observation. He noticed her pause occasionally, checking in on him subtly, making sure the home was secure and that he was comfortable, all while believing him asleep. Each small gesture was imbued with sincerity. She was neither seeking favor nor recognition. She acted out of genuine care, not expectation. The rancher felt a stirring of something long buried: admiration, disbelief, and beneath it all, a cautious hope that perhaps he had underestimated the human capacity for goodness. This carefully staged test revealed far more than he anticipated. It was not just her efficiency or competence that impressed him, but the consistency of her integrity. In every small action, she demonstrated qualities he valued above wealth or status: honesty, empathy, diligence, and selflessness. For the first time in many years, he confronted the possibility that someone could enter his life without ulterior motives, that trust was not entirely futile. By the time he allowed himself to rise, His mind was a mixture of surprise and contemplation. The widow, unaware of the scrutiny she had been under, continued her duties as if nothing had occurred. Yet in his mind, the image of her dedication, compassion, and quiet strength was etched indelibly. This test, which he had designed to confirm his suspicions, had instead shattered them, leaving him questioning the walls he had built around his heart for so long. That night marked a turning point. The rancher realized that while he had been testing her, she had simultaneously tested his own assumptions about trust and human nature. The widow's genuine character forced him to reconsider not only his judgment of others, but also his capacity to open himself to companionship. Little did he know, this revelation would set the stage for deeper connections, challenges, and a growing bond neither of them could have predicted. The widow had no idea that the rancher had been watching her the previous evening. To her, it had been a typical night, filled with chores and responsibilities that had become part of her new routine. She moved through the ranch with quiet efficiency, tending to the animals, preparing meals, and checking on the house to ensure everything was in order. Her movements were fluid, confident, and unassuming, a reflection of the resilience that life had instilled in her. What stood out most was her natural kindness, a quality that revealed itself not in grand gestures, but in the small, thoughtful acts she performed without expectation. She noticed when the youngest calf seemed restless and lingered to soothe it, whispering gently to calm the creature. She ensured the chickens had clean water and that the barn animals were comfortable, even taking extra steps to mend a loose fence post that could have caused harm. Each action, though simple, radiated sincerity and demonstrated a care that went beyond obligation. When interacting with the ranch hands, she treated them with respect, neither speaking down to them nor seeking to assert superiority. She listened when they shared concerns or advice, and she offered assistance whenever possible. Her demeanor was steady and calm, her words encouraging, and her presence reassuring. Unlike others who might have sought to impress or ingratiate themselves, she let her integrity and work ethic speak for her. Her humility was not weakness. It was a quiet strength that drew the admiration of those around her. The rancher, observing from his vantage point, could hardly believe what he was seeing. Every instinct he had, honed over years of skepticism, suggested caution, yet here was evidence that defied expectation. The widow's actions were consistent, genuine, and thoughtful. She did not falter under the weight of responsibility, nor did she seek attention for her efforts. Her kindness was instinctual, not performed, and it left a profound impression on the rancher, who had long believed that true selflessness was rare in the world. As the days passed, her positive influence on the ranch became more pronounced. The animals responded to her presence with calm obedience. The workers found themselves more cooperative and motivated under her subtle leadership, and even the ranch house itself seemed to reflect the care she poured into it. She anticipated needs before they became problems, acted without hesitation, and corrected issues gently but decisively. Every action reinforced the idea that she was not merely competent, but trustworthy, dependable, and inherently good-hearted. The rancher began to find himself seeking opportunities to observe her, not out of suspicion but out of genuine fascination. He noticed the subtle ways she navigated challenges, how she handled an obstinate horse, soothed a frightened animal, or comforted a worker who had made a mistake. Her problem-solving skills were paired with empathy, her authority balanced with humility. Slowly, he began to recognize that she possessed qualities he had long admired but seldom encountered: patience, honesty, resilience, and a deep capacity for compassion. By the end of this period, the widow had unknowingly passed every test the rancher could devise. Her behavior consistently proved that her intentions were pure, her character strong, and her heart genuine. She had earned the respect and admiration of everyone on the ranch, not through words or promises, but through the quiet, steady rhythm of her actions. For the rancher, the realization was transformative. He had built walls around his heart to protect himself from disappointment and betrayal, yet she was slowly dismantling them, not through charm or manipulation, but through authenticity and kindness. It became clear that her presence was not only valuable for the operation of the ranch, but also for the possibility of something deeper, something more personal. Her natural goodness had begun to open a space within him for trust, respect, and perhaps even affection, challenging everything he had believed about human motives and the loneliness he had accepted as permanent. The rancher had long considered himself a man of discernment. Years of experience managing the ranch, dealing with workers, and navigating the complexities of human nature had taught him to trust little and question everything. He had seen people with hidden agendas, whose words painted one picture while their actions told another. Yet, despite his vigilance, the widow's presence on the ranch was forcing him to confront a reality he had never anticipated: that someone could act with consistent integrity, kindness and honesty without ulterior motives. It began subtly, with small moments that caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way she tended to the animals with gentle care, calming a frightened horse or noticing when a calf needed extra attention. Perhaps it was her quiet patience with the ranch hands, offering guidance without condescension, listening to concerns without judgment, and lending a helping hand without expectation. Each day, she displayed a combination of competence and compassion that was so rare, so genuine that it challenged the rancher's hardened assumptions about human nature. One evening, as he watched her move through the barn, adjusting equipment and speaking softly to the animals, a wave of astonishment passed over him. He had expected efficiency, yes, but not this level of instinctive understanding, this seamless blend of empathy and skill. The widow's every action radiated sincerity. She did not perform for recognition, she did not seek approval. Her behavior was entirely natural, guided by a moral compass that operated independently of external reward. For the rancher, whose life had been built on vigilance and guarded judgment, this realization was both unsettling and fascinating. He found himself reflecting on the preconceived notions he had held for so long. He had believed that wealth attracted opportunists, that few people were capable of kindness without hidden agendas. Yet here was living proof that these beliefs were not universal. The widow had not once acted in self-interest, had not once sought to manipulate or ingratiate herself. Every decision she made, every task she undertook, was marked by integrity and genuine care. It was as if she carried an invisible standard of honesty and goodness that no challenge could tarnish. The surprise deepened as he considered her interactions with the ranch hands. Unlike others who might have sought to assert authority, she approached each person with respect and attentiveness, fostering cooperation and trust rather than fear or obligation. Her influence on the ranch was subtle but powerful. She inspired efficiency and harmony without force, creating an environment that was productive, stable, and infused with goodwill. For a man accustomed to commanding obedience rather than earning it, this was a revelation. What struck him most profoundly, however, was her instinctive care for him personally. Unaware of the test he had conducted days earlier, she had acted with genuine concern, ensuring that he had everything he needed, checking quietly that his comfort and safety were maintained. It was not flattery or manipulation. It was simple, sincere attention, a reflection of her character rather than a strategy to win favor. The rancher could scarcely believe that someone could be so naturally considerate, so unassuming in their benevolence. By the end of the week, he had come to a startling conclusion. The widow's character was beyond reproach. Every observation, every interaction confirmed that she was honest, hardworking, and compassionate. His initial skepticism gave way to admiration, a profound recognition that she was not just capable, but exceptional. She had surpassed his expectations, not through effort to impress, but through the quiet demonstration of her true self. For the rancher, this realization was transformative. The walls he had built around his heart, forged by years of caution and mistrust, began to show cracks. He felt astonishment, yes, but also a stirring of hope, a tentative possibility that trust, and perhaps even love, might be attainable. The widow had done more than earn his respect. She had challenged the very foundation of his assumptions, revealing that genuine goodness existed in a world he had long thought, guarded and wary. The days and weeks following the Widow's quiet demonstrations of kindness marked a subtle shift in the rancher's world. Where once he had kept everyone at a distance, viewing interactions with suspicion and expecting hidden motives, he now found himself observing her with a different lens. It was no longer merely about her efficiency or competence. It was about the warmth she brought into the ranch, the way her presence softened the edges of his rigid routines. Slowly, respect transformed into curiosity, and curiosity began to bloom into something deeper, a fragile but undeniable affection. Their interactions became more personal, though still tempered with caution. The widow, unaware of the emotional impact she was having, continued her work with diligence and humility. Yet the rancher, who had previously spoken little beyond necessity, found himself drawn into conversations with her. At first, they were brief exchanges, comments about chores, the weather, or the animals, but gradually they extended into moments of laughter, shared stories, and small debates. He discovered a sharpness and intelligence in her mind that matched her quiet strength, a depth that intrigued him more than he had anticipated. She, in turn, began to notice subtleties in his behavior. Though stern and reserved, he had a keen eye for detail and a fairness that was rare. He listened when she spoke, sometimes surprising her with a question or observation that revealed he had been paying attention all along. She saw that beneath the rugged exterior and commanding presence, there was a man who valued integrity and loyalty and who could recognize these qualities in others. This realization made her feel a tentative trust toward him, a feeling she had not expected to cultivate so quickly. Together, they began to navigate the rhythms of the ranch in a way that created a shared understanding. The widow anticipated his needs, adjusting her work to support the ranch and its owner, while he gradually allowed her more autonomy, testing her judgment in small ways that acknowledged her competence. There was an unspoken partnership forming, one based not on hierarchy or obligation, but on mutual respect. Each act of consideration, each moment of thoughtful action, reinforced the growing bond between them. Evenings brought opportunities for quieter, more personal connection. While the ranch's work continued into the late hours, they would occasionally share a brief meal or a moment on the veranda. In these times, the rancher began to reveal glimpses of himself he had long hidden, memories of his youth, reflections on his life's trials, and occasionally a hint of the loneliness that had become familiar. The widow listened without judgment, offering empathy and insight, her responses gentle yet perceptive. These exchanges, though small, began to erode the walls he had maintained for so long. Outside influences occasionally tested this growing bond. Town gossip or minor disputes with ranch hands could have disrupted their fragile connection, yet the widow's steadiness and the rancher's emerging trust allowed them to navigate such challenges together. He found that he no longer instinctively viewed people with suspicion. Instead, he began to see the possibility of genuine goodness in the world, a perspective reshaped by her influence. By the time the first hints of autumn colored the fields, their relationship had evolved into a quiet, unspoken closeness. The rancher looked forward to her presence, not out of duty or expectation, but because her company brought him a sense of comfort and warmth he had not known in years. The widow, meanwhile, found herself appreciating his fairness, his protective instincts toward the ranch, and the subtle kindness he displayed beneath his stern exterior. It was in this period of mutual understanding that both realized something profound. Their bond was no longer solely defined by work or necessity. It had grown into a connection grounded in respect, admiration, and the tentative stirrings of affection. Trust had taken root where suspicion had once dominated, and in its place, a relationship began to form that promised not only companionship, but the possibility of love. Just as the bond between the rancher and the widow was beginning to blossom into something deeper, external pressures and internal uncertainties arose to test their connection. The town, small and tightly knit, was quick to notice the unusual closeness forming between them. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered admiration at the widow's integrity, while others cast doubt, questioning her intentions and suggesting she might be seeking advantage from the wealthy rancher. The gossip, though largely unfounded, created a tension that neither of them had anticipated. The rancher, who had long relied on self-sufficiency and distrust to protect his heart, struggled internally. The whispers of others stung not because he believed them, but because they reminded him of the vulnerability he felt in allowing himself to care for someone again. Years of solitude had taught him that attachment brought risk, and he feared that opening his heart could lead to disappointment, betrayal, or regret. Even as he admired the widow, he hesitated, questioning whether it was wise to allow himself to trust fully despite all evidence of her genuine character. The widow, too, faced challenges. Though she had proven herself on the ranch through diligence and integrity, she was keenly aware of the delicate social balance in the town. She knew that any misstep could be misconstrued, and she was determined to act in a way that preserved both her dignity and the growing trust she shared with the rancher. Her patience, humility, and quiet confidence guided her through these moments of scrutiny. She handled gossip and judgment with grace, letting her consistent behavior speak louder than the rumors surrounding her. A defining moment came when an unexpected crisis struck the ranch. A sudden illness among the livestock threatened both the animals and the livelihood of the operation. The rancher, despite his wealth, could not manage everything alone, and the widow stepped forward without hesitation. Her experience, combined with her calm and decisive manner, became instrumental in navigating the emergency. She organized the ranch hands, tended to the sick animals, and worked tirelessly through long hours, showing courage, resourcefulness, and selflessness. Witnessing her in action, the rancher experienced a mixture of relief, admiration, and deep emotional realization. He saw not only her competence, but also her unwavering dedication, qualities that affirmed everything he had come to respect about her character. In the midst of chaos, she acted without thought of reward, without hesitation, and without fear. It became clear that she was not just trustworthy, she was extraordinary. Someone whose loyalty and heart could be relied upon even in the most challenging circumstances. This shared trial became a turning point for their relationship. The rancher, moved by her bravery and integrity, confronted his own fears of vulnerability. He recognized that trust, once carefully guarded, could now be given because it was deserved. For her part, the widow saw the depth of his respect and emerging affection, understanding that his cautious demeanor masked a heart capable of love, waiting for the right person to awaken it. With the crisis resolved, both emerged stronger. The town's whispers, once a source of tension, faded in the face of the widow's proven character and the visible partnership between them. Mutual admiration and shared experience had forged a bond built not on appearances or convenience, but on genuine understanding, trust, and respect. By the end of this period, the rancher and widow had faced doubt, scrutiny, and adversity and had come through it united. Their connection had been tested and tempered, emerging resilient, authentic, and ready to flourish. What began as cautious observation and tentative respect had transformed into a relationship founded on honesty, courage, and the realization that love could grow in even the most guarded hearts. The rancher had spent years building walls around his heart, convinced that solitude was safer than vulnerability. Yet through the quiet persistence, integrity, and kindness of the widow, those walls had begun to crumble. Over months of shared labor, mutual respect, and moments of subtle intimacy, a bond had formed between them, one that was no longer defined solely by duty or circumstance, but by trust, admiration, and the delicate beginnings of love. It was a crisp autumn morning when the transformation of their relationship became undeniably clear. The ranch was alive with the familiar rhythm of work, livestock grazing peacefully, fences repaired, and tools laid neatly in their proper places. The widow moved about with her usual grace and efficiency, checking on the animals and ensuring the house was in order. But today, there was a quiet anticipation in the air, a sense that something unspoken was about to unfold. The rancher observed her from a distance, his heart a mix of admiration, warmth, and nervous excitement. He approached her, stepping lightly across the dewy grass. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a combination of curiosity and the gentle calm that had characterized her every interaction. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The vast ranch, the surrounding fields, and the distant hills all faded into the background. This was a moment not about labor or responsibility, but about connection, a meeting of two hearts that had weathered challenge, suspicion, and uncertainty to arrive at mutual understanding. The rancher spoke first, his voice steady but carrying a rare warmth. He expressed the respect and admiration he had felt for her from the very beginning, acknowledging not only her work ethic, but the integrity, kindness, and courage that defined her. The widow listened, her expression calm yet attentive, recognizing the sincerity in his words. She had worked diligently to earn trust and respect, and now, hearing it directly from him, she felt a quiet validation of both her efforts and her character. Then came the moment that neither could have anticipated at the outset of their acquaintance. The rancher, long accustomed to solitude and the rhythm of a life lived alone, took the step he had avoided for so many years. He spoke of his desire for companionship, for a partner who would share in both the burdens and the joys of life on the ranch. He admitted his fear of vulnerability, of allowing someone to enter a heart that had long been closed, and he expressed gratitude for her patience and steadfastness. The widow, moved by his honesty, responded with equal sincerity. She spoke of her own journey, the hardships she had faced, the resilience she had cultivated, and the respect she had developed for him through observation and shared experience. Her words were gentle but firm, a reflection of the strength and self-assurance that had guided her through every trial. In that moment, the mutual recognition of trust, admiration, and burgeoning love became undeniable. From that day forward, their lives intertwined in a new, profound way. They worked side by side, but now with an awareness of companionship, mutual respect, and shared purpose. The rancher's heart, once guarded and solitary, had opened to love and partnership. The widow found not only stability and security, but a deep sense of belonging and appreciation for the life they would build together. The townspeople, who had once whispered doubt and speculation, now observed the union with admiration. It was clear that their bond was authentic, forged through diligence, trust, and courage. Together, the rancher and widow created a home that was more than the sum of its parts, a place of warmth, love, and mutual support. In the end, the rancher realized that wealth and property, while valuable, had never brought the fulfillment he had found in the widow's presence. Her kindness, integrity, and steadfast heart had transformed his life, proving that true happiness comes not from what one owns, but from the connections forged with those who genuinely care. Together they embraced a future full of promise, companionship, and the quiet joy of two hearts united by trust, respect, and love.